Welcome to today's lesson on APIs. APIs, or application programming interfaces, are the ways in which apps talk to each other. And this is really powerful when we're thinking about building our own automations and applications because it lets us create or borrow solutions that have already been created by other apps and use them in our own applications to make them more powerful. So let's talk a little bit about how this works. You can think of an API or the system that an API works in a lot like a restaurant. So here your API is like a waiter. Your client is, the person, the hungry customer that's trying to get some food. And then your kitchen is the API server. And the way in which this process works is it starts with a customer coming into a restaurant and looking at the menu. The menu has a curated list of things that you could order. And the customer might, ask the waiter for a glass of water and a burger. They are choosing from this curated menu what they want. And then the waiter, which is the API in this situation, can take that order or that request, what it's called in the API world, that request, and take it back to the API server, or in our analogy, the kitchen. The kitchen will then make whatever the client or the customer asked for and give it back to the waiter, or in our scenario, the API, and then bring that food or bring that dish back to the client. And so, this is what's called a response. And so what's happening here really is that there is this curated list of options that an application provides. And as a client, you can pick which ones you want to use, send a request via the API to your server. Their server can, create a new page. It can create a new email. It can go and look at a map. It can use a payment method that's already been created. So a lot of different things that you can request based on the app that you're talking to, and then you'll get a response. And then that response can be fed into your automation or your app, whatever you're building. So this is really helpful if you think about the services that already exist. This is really helpful where you don't have to create things from scratch. And the example of this is the other day I was trying to get a full list of places in my city where pickleball can be played. There wasn't really a simple way to get a list like that for my small city. So I used the Google Maps API to very easily programmatically go into Google Maps and generate a list of all of the places that mentioned pickleball. And that gave me a list of about 150 courts in the city that I was able to just pop into a Google Sheet and then have for my reference. Another really common API people use is the Stripe API. So if you're trying to integrate any sort of payment system in your platforms, instead of creating a whole payment system from scratch, you might just use the Stripe API to use their payment system, but programmatically get into it, get responses, get requests, or send requests, and really just have a more robust application where you are not creating and maintaining each part of it, but you're using the best of what others have created to make your application stronger. And you'll see a few, kinds of terms thrown around. This is an extreme intro to APIs. So a couple that I just want you to be aware of is specifically get and post. So a get request is when you want to retrieve a resource from a server. So if you're saying, go look at my Gmail and get emails sent to me by Helen, that is an example of a get request. This might look different based on what type of APIs you're working with. It might look different based on what services you're working with. But in general, GET is a request that helps you get information from somewhere. And then the second type of big request is a post request. And this is when you're creating something new. So if you're saying, go create a new email in my inbox or create this new transaction in Stripe, that would be an example of a post request. Again, it can look different based on the API, based on the application, but these are sort of two big categories. And then others you'll see is a put request that lets you update or edit an existing response, a delete request that erases a response or a resource. So these are just a few different examples of how APIs work on the back end. But really, to get an API working for yourself, what you need is some sort of account with the service that you're trying to get an API through. And then almost always you'll have an API key, unless it's a free API service. So the weather API allows you to actually, I think it's called Open Weather. You can actually go in and just use it without an API key. It's open to the public. But then APIs like Google or Google's APIs, Stripe APIs, those will have you use a key and then have some sort of balance against which it charges you to use an API X amount of times. So today we're actually going to go in and create some of these API keys with AI-enabled platforms. We will do that in the next video.